Yeah, you're on. I know you were just going to say something, and then you found out you were on the air and you held back. So you are now compelled to proceed. What is it that you were going to say before you went on air?
Thank you both.
Sam, who is this guy? What is going on here? What are we doing? And good to see you, Sam.
Seriously, good to see you too, Fred. We're gonna have to, I think, have him explain that because Farsam's a real polymath here. Farsam Shadab, everyone, welcome, Farsam. It's great to have you here today. I'm excited to jump in because we're going to be talking about some topics that I don't find get talked about very much, such as holonomics, holochain, the future of medicine and technology, things that Farsam and his crew seem to be sort of uniquely tapped into. When I met Farsam, about 3-4 months ago? Would you say something like that?
It feels like it's been a few years, Sam, but it's only a few short months ago.
I know. It seems like it's been a long time. I was immediately struck by just how dynamic Farsam is and how many broad interests and connections that he's making. It's like, he's a true genius in the true sense of the word in terms of having access to just a tremendous library of information in his mind and ability to sort of network those synapses like few others. So I'm excited about this conversation, Fred.
I'm sorry. What? Is this like true genius, networking, synapses, polymath? Like what the hell's going on here? I just showed up for a conversation. What does that stuff even mean?
And I hope there's some confusion here because I thought I was coming to you guys to learn about holonomics. So, oops.
Shit. Oh,
and then polymath. The only way I know about the word poly is from like polynomials, and polynomials are a math term. So I don't. This idea of polymath, I guess that means an expert in multiple arenas or something.
Polyamorous. Yeah.
Oh. That's right. Yeah.
He's basically it means that he's polyamorous in a number of with math. He's polyamorous with math, essentially. He's making love to geometry in the same way that he does with trigonometry and calculus, etc. That's what a polymath is, I think.
Okay, good. All right, I got it. So it's kind of like the community of things that the community of things that Farsam is involved with is. There's some sort of hierarchy of what gets more attention, what gets more priority, who gets him which day, kind of thing.
Well, right, exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. I feel
that the term polymath is just a term polymaths use to describe one another. So it's kind of like a polymath thing. And I don't really use it that often. But I appreciate the compliment, Sam, and I'm going to do my best to live up to that.
So it's like the P word. The P word, like a polymath, is like a word that polymaths use with polys. Matt, they call each other polys and stuff. Is that fair enough? Or are we like polys together if we're both polymaths? Or what's up with that?
Probably. That's exactly what it's like on the inside, the club level.
At the club. At the club level. So, Farsam, why does Sam isn't that easily overturned with the personality and the intellect and the capacity of the people he meets? And let me just tell you and our listeners about how it is that you're even here with us today. And that is, we had one more assignment to do today, and it was an assignment to have really a spectacular guest meet with us today. Like that's really what showed up at 9 a.m. this morning. We both realized that what we needed was a spectacular guest. That was the first priority. And hopefully that person would be able to meet with us today. There was like a little bit of a deadline. So Sam had only one name on that list, and that was you. And I'm honored to be in your presence. But really what I'm left with is you get to tell me a little bit about who you are. I only know Sam for another 2 or 4 months after you, by the way. I've only known Sam for less than a year, too. So we're both like smitten with his polymath and all that, all his spectacular nature. So now it's an opportunity for you and I to get to know each other so that I can see through, you can use me as a vehicle through to get to our listeners about what it is you're up to in the world. So what is it that you are up to, and why did Sam choose you to be on this show?
I appreciate it. I'd love to explore that. And are we working with a rough framework of about an hour today?
Yeah, a little bit. It's a tight framework. Sam actually has to leave at the top of the hour for the next gig that he is booked for.
Let's cover what we can. Sam, you did lure me with the promise of a medical assessment with Dr. Fred at the last 10 minutes. So is that
That's
still here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
If you want that, some people, we should wait for the last 10 minutes to do that one for sure. Yeah.
I couldn't handle that.
I promised a prostate exam from Fred.
Oh, okay.
He is a doctor and everything.
Yeah, we got that. All right.
Fred, so I am aware. Are you a doctor of psychiatry?
I am a doctor. I'm an MD, doctor of psychiatry, conventionally trained at Northwestern University Medical School in downtown Chicago, Illinois. And approximately 8 years before I began that training, I gave up on medicine and gave up on it right through medical school on the way through as well. So who I've been is a sort of a non-conventional practitioner with a significant conventional education.
Wow, you are my kind of guy, and I think we're gonna go deep in that world, and that's a great starting point right there. Because I'm even gonna guess here, maybe this is polymath skill here, that you were in and around Northwestern in the 70s.
Nope, I was there from 1984 to 1989.
Okay, well, I've got the first one wrong. 3 strikes, I'm out. So you guys keep track of that, please.
Yep.
The reason I brought it up is because my father was in and around medical residency programs that included Northwestern, I believe, in the early and mid 70s. My brother and I were born in the mid 70s in Chicago. And we are the children of Iranian immigrants. And as Persian Americans who've been living our lives out in Southern California and growing up here most of our lives, we've each branched out into some very interesting terrain. I started my serious academic career at UC San Diego in the early 90s. And I was fascinated by what this emerging field of cognitive science had to say. And I probably broke my father's heart on some level in not taking his quiet hint that I should be a medical doctor. But found this interdisciplinary field of study that had been given a formalized full department level dedication exclusively at UC San Diego, where I could study philosophy, neuroscience, psychology, basic computer science, linguistic philosophy, and on down the line in this really rich environment where, to me, that was all code for consciousness studies. Now, I didn't have that phraseology at the time, because those academics, those ivory towers, they can't say that, those 2 words. They just, unless you're at California Institute of Integral Studies or it's similar schools, you're not talking about consciousness studies. It has to be an interdisciplinary study of human cognition as pertains to neuroscience, philosophy, psychology. They have to do that.
So how and when did that bridge start to get formed?
That bridge started forming for me, I think, in late high school, with just interests ranging from Alan Watts to Carl Sagan and lots of things in between. But then within that program, I still hit some interesting walls. It was clear to me a couple years in that there was a consciousness studies problem. That the arch materialists, the philosophers who founded the department and were running it, who I don't necessarily need to name, but if anyone's interested, follow up with me, were doing this very reductionist thing. And it's pretty more commonly understood now. It was a bit of a sleight of hand back then academically, but their neurophilosophy, which is literally what that was termed, was founded in a view of humanity and human identity that is summarized as the neurocomputational metaphor of biology. In other words, our nervous systems, our identities, our brain, our mind are all reducible to biological parallel processing systems, right?
So essentially, we could sort of call this psychological materialism, essentially.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And everything in that program was driving master students, PhDs, and even undergrads to adopt that view that ultimately the highest totem of that series of studies would be getting into the biophysics of neurology and trying to come up with better and better algorithms and modeling methods to understand neuronal communication systems, which must be likenable to how computer circuitry works.
Is this where connectionism was formed?
That is exactly the philosophy of, now I'm giving away the names. So it's a husband and wife duo, the Churchlands. And Paul Churchland is actually an established philosopher in the field of, neurophilosophy. But he definitely is a leader in connectionist theory, or was. Daniel Dennett has come in as well. You guys probably know somewhat Daniel Dennett's worldview. But his wife, Patricia Churchland, actually wrote the book and coined the phrase or the terminology neurophilosophy in the late 80s. Now, it obviously has great value academically if you contextualize it properly. But if you turn it into a kind of, intellectual or academic Bible, that this is the cutting edge of consciousness studies or humanity's scientific understanding of the human mind, then you are limited to and left to their one methodological approach. And so that's a preview of explaining sort of what I'm working with now, where we're at with what I do in the world, which is run a technology incubator focusing on transformative technologies for the advancement of human consciousness. But we've really had to leave that paradigm behind. And the way we do that in an intellectually honest way is to practice methodological pluralism. And so this scientism of materialism has some value. It just can't be the be all and end all and epistemological singular note that's always played in trying to understand how reality operates.
So my understanding of connectionism essentially is that it takes the metaphor of a brain being like a biological computer, and it basically says that metaphor is true. It doesn't really go beyond that. That essentially what is happening in terms of the connections in our computer and what is happening in terms of our connections in our brain are that it's more than just a metaphor. It's essentially the model of how things work. And so what you're saying, from what I'm hearing, what I'm picking up, is you saw that was only a metaphor and only sufficient to a certain degree of understanding, and that there's so much beyond that in terms of consciousness and what creates consciousness and what consciousness actually is. Is that accurate?
Yes, Sam. Thanks for articulating it that way, because you've also made it very easy for me to link in a key point here. And interestingly, I learned this kind of counter move in my studies in the UC San Diego Cognitive Science Department, particularly with the work of Antonio Damasio, who's the author of Descartes' Error. And in quick summary, him and guys like him have pointed out that the leading edge intellectuals of their time were always restricted to the material technological advancements of their era. In Descartes' time, the most advanced mechanical technology were literally hydraulic and pneumatic pump systems, which were basically the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, right? As you can start to operationalize heavy industrial machinery and start commercializing mass production of goods. But they were metaphorically limited and in a way blinded by sort of what they were enamored with at the time, which is, wow, what can we do with these mechanics? And so they started to create this sort of intellectual feedback loop where everything about the human body, including the mind, the humors of the brain and the physiology of the heart, had to be reducible to the mechanics of the time. And we see the exact same thing happening now, which the silicon wafer and integrated circuitry systems and everything that we understand about how computation works on those substrates must be the best way to describe what's going on inside of us, what's going on inside of our minds. And the kind of insulting gesture, Sam, if you will, is that in their most ideal vision, your words you were just uttering and Dr. Fred's thoughts as he's listening to me would one day be modelable, capturable, and reducible to a kind of connectome. So we have the human genome, we have the biome that people are talking about more and more. There are actual connectome projects that in the connectionist vision attempt to perfectly model. They're hoping with artificial intelligence and faster and more powerful computers, there will be real-time capture of human mental and emotional processes. And we beg to differ.
So,
go ahead,
go
Sam.
ahead, Fred. Oh.
All right. I have my question is this. I really your brilliance shines through, as well as your inquisitiveness along the areas of how and why, and what it means to function as cognitive beings, as neurological beings, as how to utilize our mind and our brain, and what models we use in order to classify or categorize how our thinking and how our discoveries and how our explorations and how our thoughts, how our behaviors are manifest. And one of the limitations, like right from the beginning of your introduction, you talked about that you saw all of these terms as being something more about consciousness studies, and that was a no-no when talking about the sort of the sub-disciplines that UCSD had broken down into what it means to explore what it is to be in human thinking, or human thought, even more than thinking, I guess, is, the human experience, ontological experience. So it seems like there might be a deep flaw here, a deep flaw in our thinking, which is we develop to a certain point to get to the capacity, like we now know, or we think we know how mega computers work, or so now we're comparing how we think to the technology of the time, which is really chip related, which is really a computer rather than hydraulic or pneumatic pumps that were the time of perhaps in Descartes, where everything got reduced to that. Now we're reducing to computers. And it seems like there's stuff out that in some ways we're so arrogant to think that we used our own thinking to get to the far edges of the only thing that we could use to explain our own thinking, as if there isn't things outside of our capacity to think and be that we have no access of or explanation to functionally utilize. And it is out there for which maybe it sounds like you're exploring, like out there beyond that, into the quantum, or I'm a little bit above my pay grade here, but into the areas beyond which we know nothing about is where the real action might be in explaining how we are the humans we are. Wow. If you caught even 10% of what I just said, you really are a genius, by the way. I don't even know what I said.
Yeah, no, I rated just about 11%, so I think I qualify.
All right, good, go for it.
No, that was great, and I appreciate you. You kind of opened up a landscape there that makes this all the more easy. And what we're having a conversation with, I feel like now, gentlemen, is where we're at societally and civilizationally, and we're all also looking hard at what information technology and its expressions in social media and the like, run by both big tech and big data, are doing to us culturally and personally. I appreciate intellectually that the Churchlins and their ilk, in the 80s, as they were up and coming, were producing materials that were themselves a reaction. There was a reactive stance to an era of the 50s, 60s, and 70s that they were trying to course correct for. They were seeing a kind of proto-consciousness studies in New Age hippiedom start to attempt to colonize academia. And they were kind of course correcting in a bit of a more conservative stance, while also working with the latest breakthroughs in neuroscience at the time. So there certainly is a kind of parallel processing happening neurologically. There certainly is a kind of seeming computation, but what they miss, and this is where we can start to introduce some key pieces, specifically the role and influence of Ken Wilber both in terms of my personal biography and his influence on the field of consciousness studies. That's where the terminology was introduced to me by the late 90s as I discovered his work. But specifically, you look at the problems of what are collectively considered out of the realm of science, right? So then it's all, if it's not science and it's not empirically validatable, then it's some form of mysticism. There's bad forms of mysticism. There's religious mysticism. There's folk wisdom that has been passed on from generation to generation. And it's like, if your Russian great grandmother taught your mother that, some getting a cold is transmitted through some unscientific manner, and you pass that. We want to have the scientific insights necessary to understand who we are and how we operate and how we can, function best. But we also don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater as we proceed down this empirical route. And I have to quote a different philosopher, Jürgen Habermas, and his conversations around his predictions that this runaway scientism, right? So scientism is when science itself, whether overtly or covertly, becomes a kind of dogmatic religion. And that can definitely be something we see in the ivory towers. You run the risk of practicing what gets called eliminative materialism, because you're going in and looking for empirical verification of things, but you can't empirically verify things unless you have a system to reduce them to. And that system that we rely on, this is today's academic sort of zeitgeist, which is either the mathematization of things or via physics, some kind of set of physics properties that are also going to be reduced to formulae. And we get in this position where our methods are our map. And our map is something we have to be very intellectually sensitive about, whether we're imposing that onto reality. And so now we're back to the connectionism, Sam. And we're back to whether or not a connectome, a mapping of point to point to point to point. And, we can all appreciate, we're talking mapping millions of points at a microscopic scale and tracking action potentials between, axons and through dendrites to the next set of axons, and networks that become exponentially complex to track. So it's worth appreciating that there was a serious academic science and neurobiology that wanted to do real, deep, legitimate work and see what might be under the hood once we map it all out. But what is driving that mapping is a set of methods that themselves have to be philosophically examined and questioned. And that mathematics, that imposition of a set of methods, it's kind of like when a magician is moving the shells around, the sleight of hand that you may miss is their insistence on, like, the fact that, you're counting what's in front of you. Maybe there's something that's being hidden from you. Sometimes that's done intentionally, sometimes it's unintentionally. And our conceit in this world of Ken Wilber influenced integral philosophy is that really rigorous philosophers, and I'm going to mention David Chalmers, but I'm also going to call back to Habermas in a second. Chalmers is like the academic guy that stayed in the trenches, surviving the materialism and legitimizing the phraseology, consciousness studies with a lot of ongoing academic research to continue the validation process. But if I have a linguistic system that doesn't have terms like the Eskimos do, for example, with multiple terms for snow, which is a cultural reflection of their world and the lives they had to adapt to, we're not mapping with the nuance and sophistication necessary to understand ourselves and the mind without being reductionist.
Right.
So if I'm a complex whole, and eventually a connectionist with a connectome wants to have some system that's going to predict and analyze and review and even attempt to leap out into the future and see what I'm going to do, I'm going to possibly argue back or push back and say, well, wait a second, where's the free will in this conversation, right? And that's obviously where a lot of these conversations sort of spin off, is you get into philosophy, free will debates. It's a huge complex area. So Habermas warned that we are entering an era out of modernity into post-modernity, that there's a kind of colonization risk right now. As he phrased it, a colonization of the life world by the monological gaze. And the monological gaze is exactly that scientism. It's exactly that exclusively empirical worldview that's going to say, I don't care about anything you tell me. I'm not interested in Sam's history, Sam the person, Sam the soul, Sam the choose your piece. I'm going to scan and analyze Sam, and eventually I'll have a map of what Sam or who Sam is. And we maintain that you just can't do that.
It seems to me that this is related. You brought up Descartes earlier, and the fallacy in his philosophical understanding was, I think, therefore I am, that he was identifying his being with his thinking. And that as long as there were thoughts occurring, that was evidence of his existence. And that would seem to be as far as he got. Whereas if you look at, say, Buddhist thought, Eastern understandings, Confucianism, that sort of thing, the core of their philosophical structure is the being precedes the thinking. That the thinking is an aspect, a function of being, but not something that precedes being. The being is there independent of the thinking. Now, this makes me think in terms of Ray Kurzweil and his whole agenda to upload consciousness and so forth, and that this is part of the singularity, that you can upload one's consciousness to a computer and last forever in the cloud, essentially. But that would assume this reductionist mindset, would it not? Would that not still follow the same paradigm of thinking that would say who we are is nothing more than a product of thought?
Yeah, thanks for making that distinction. Descartes was definitely an idealist, and idealists and that wave of philosophy were definitely sort of carving out the mind, which was the only thing they said they felt they could verify as foundational, or in Zen speak, the ground of being is, I think, therefore I am. All I know for sure, in the most absolute sense that I can construe and verify with others, is that I know that I'm aware. And everything must emanate from that. Not that there aren't other philosophical processes.
And the Buddhists would say that who I am is the awareness, not the thinking of being aware.
Right. That's an important point as well, that there's a singular faculty of awareness that Descartes was identifying, and so mental processes and the discursive mind. So linguistic, self-representation, right? So my thinking, my thought processes is what I am, exactly. And Buddhists would maintain that's just a layer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It seems like we might be, using this model, and I'm just hanging on with dear life, by the way, with just my fingertips with what you guys are talking about, because I feel like I'm getting what you're talking about, and my jaw is dropping with what are we, the complex nature of what we're talking about. But then I get something else out of this, which really flies right from there, which is, this idea of millions of connections, exponentially complex, this whole idea that once we start looking at millions of things happening at the same time in microscopic points, or, like nanoscopic points, we start really looking at, like, that stuff is not inherently exponentially complex. It's only inherently exponentially complex when we compare it to our capacity to where we've been. It becomes exponentially complex after we decide we make a decision of what is simple and what is not simple. And then we get to millions. We're like, wow, that's more than the average human mind can actually wrap itself around. And so then once we start believing those things, or once we start accepting those things as reality, it seems like we're at a space that's self-limited, and in some ways a train off its track that appears just storming towards an obvious paradigmatic shift. So it's like the world isn't flat, y'all, like that. Like the world isn't flat. Like we're going to run into something here that just screeches us to a stop by continuing to think in this reductionist way, because for me anyways, it's very clear that that's only a way to think. And in fact, as I speak, I'm only speaking linearly. I have no choice but to thread my thoughts vocally in a linear string of concepts that I'm creating on the fly and hoping that you get over there. There are some serious limitations in our capacity to get our thoughts between each other.
Right.
And to call that everything sure does seem like we have a strong possibility of missing a whole lot of what everything really is.
Right. Well said. And if you've ever been intimate with a partner and
never have, I never have. I'd appreciate it if you didn't go there. By the way, that's none of your freaking business as far as I'm concerned. And Sam, that we're gonna just have to cut that. I don't appreciate that, but go ahead. We can cut it out.
I'm just thinking about I think I need to go get intimate with a partner now that I've been thinking. It's been a while.
I asked that as a question that needed verification first. So I just that, yeah, right. I mean, it's like there's a whole world of experiential dimensionality that you can't even necessarily feed back to your significant other or partner that maybe you can throw some words at. But there's many different ways in which to communicate and exchange. It's not always verbal, linguistic, linear discourse. And to your earlier point, see, I think that offended Fred. He just took off here. But
Fred, where the hell are you? Your video just shut off.
1 second. I just had to fix my power on my computer. I was going to lose you, and so here I am. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I think his intimate partner showed up.
She's under the table, bro.
Oh, wow.
I never do a podcast without her under the table. It's just the way that goes. That's why you get a smile from me the whole time. Otherwise, I'm frowning 23 hours a day. That's just letting you know.
Fun fact, this is Joe Rogan's secret to success.
Right.
And I think it's Spotify approved, guys. So you guys enjoy that opportunity that's there for you. I will say, because you mentioned Kurzweil, and I can't let that go, Sam.
Yeah.
It's funny because I often talk about the tail of these technological philosophies wagging the dog of reality. And I know there's a lot of brilliance behind Kurzweil's work. I also know that he's kind of created a cult following, a cult of science philosophy that's predicting such, there's actually the term futurology. So like futurological predictions that are linear, that by this date, 2030 or by 2045, we'll have hit the singularity. And he breaks these things down, and things that he thinks literally are going to follow Moore's law. Never mind that there's lots of people in the industry that you may want to talk to that have a very relevant opinion, the semiconductor industry, who will tell you right now, and I've done that, leaders in that space will say Moore's law was abandoned as far as we're concerned. We're the ones making the semiconductor breakthroughs years ago, and it shows no sign of coming back. So, but that extreme sort of like, look what L. Ron Hubbard did. Look what a lot of
Werner Erhard,
thank you. That's a great one too. Like back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, we're able to build these sort of like linearly projected systems and enroll a whole lot of people into this belief that certain timelines are going to come true. I mean, these are essentials of any kind of cult indoctrination. There's always some timeline that you're being entered into by participating, and then there's also a bunch of promises. Now, look at Kurzweil's transhumanism as a kind of rapture cult based in scientism, that at some point you're going to be raptured into the singularity, right? Is that different than a lot of New Age spiritual cults that are promising some kind of either alien pickup that's scheduled or some kind of ascension? And
that's why I haven't been a successful cult leader yet. I kept on wondering why I haven't been a successful cult leader. I mean, I have all of the right qualities. I was just missing the timeline and the rapture thing.
Right.
Thank you.
Here's a book.
I'm now going to implement that into my teachings. So thank you, Farsam.
What you need is UC Berkeley professor Margaret Singer's book called Cults in Our Midst, decades of study where she found all the common denominators. And that includes military cults, corporate cults, family cults, little community spiritual cults. They all tend to imbue the same criteria into their followers. And so you just take that book and you reverse engineer it, and you know exactly how to start a cult, Sam.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. I've been wondering
I think we're done with today's. I think that's all we really needed to get to for today. I'm pretty sure. So drive carefully, and don't forget to try the veal. I mean, really, what we got here is an opportunity for Sam to launch into his new practice as a cult leader. And, he already has the following. They're waiting for him. So I think, with this final touch, that should be enough to drive him into the next realm. So good work, man.
I think that ding from that cell phone was good evidence that this is exactly what's needed right now, too.
Mm-hmm. What is it about cults? What is it about, cults? Can we tie this in to the reality bending that we're doing here, the challenging of the edges of reality, and what becomes interesting about a cult leader? I have cult litter for my 3 cats right next door. Yeah. I have a bag of cult litter over there. And what I'm really interested in is, what is it about cult leaders in these difficult, in these difficult times that makes them even more interesting to the intellectual, to the people who are searching for answers? What is it that they can do that is outside of the realm that has me now throw down everything and start listening, following, and agreeing with anything that some of these charismatic folks have to say about things?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I'm still stuck on the cult litter thing. I think cult litter is what the cult leaders put down in the ashram so that, everyone kind of hang out for like a week at a time and not have to run out to use the restroom. That's what you need. And that's the ultimate form of mind control, is when you're controlling people's pee-pee and poo-poo.
People's bowel movements. Yeah.
Right.
Seriously. Yeah.
Right. I think what we're getting into, and there's some prior conversations with Sam that have helped set the stage for this today. We're all talking about sense making nowadays, right? So there are intellectual cults. A cult can also be seen as a kind of upper boundary or ceiling that we end up hitting. There's lazy cults where you just join this one thing, you sign into this one dogma, and you don't really think a lot more about it. And you're sort of blindly following things, or maybe you're born into one, you're literally taken over from day one. But these more complex cults that, I would argue that if you have a set of social media influencers that you're obsessed with, right? You've set up a bunch of icons for yourself that you track and allow to influence you. But at least in that world and in that space, there's multiple inputs, multiple influences, and it's dynamic and changing. So it's not there's room for heterodoxy, there's room for turnover, and there's room for process. But we know that there's a kind of cult of technology that, following Tristan Harris and the Center for Humane Tech, as well as Daniel Schmachtenberger's analyses, there is I'm going to say the full version of this, Sam, because I heard Tristan say this the other day in a discussion with Russell Brand, that the race to the bottom of the brainstem also has built in and found a backdoor to the human soul. Mm-hmm. And so it's one thing to sort of hijack someone's awareness for the afternoon. Teenagers in the Instagram algorithms, there's actually timing mechanisms that they've determined based on withholding likes after delivering likes, and then dropping likes that have been accumulating. They don't give it to you in real time. They wait 12 hours because they have figured out that teenagers, if they're kind of pushed and then pulled and then pushed and then pulled, they get more addicted. And they're waiting, that apprehension for, wait a second, did people look at my post yet? Is how they're being deliberately hijacked. So that insensitivity to especially developmental periods of life, teenagedom, that willingness to exploit, developing people's awareness and cognition. Because philosophy, in the West at least, has failed to establish any kind of norms around consciousness studies and human development, right? So at some point, Mark Zuckerberg and others basically realized this is open field day time to do what we need to do and what we want to do to hijack minds, because there's no regulatory body to prevent any of these actions, right? There's all kinds of attempts at after the fact legislating, but they're not gonna win that battle. And we're going to see, as this decade unfolds with the emergence of brain-computer interfacing, BCI, and what Elon and others are doing with two things. Well, so there's neural lace, which is the actual hardware he's developing, And there's Neuralink, that is the bigger project right now, enfolding all the research into BCI necessary to get to a point where neural lace actually works. And while we all commend any work he wants to do to help anyone with any neurological challenge, which is the front-facing side of the Neuralink work, he's already stated and come out that, we'll all be jacking ourselves into the internet before the decade's out with Neuralink and neural lace entering our nervous systems. And so that gets into, you had mentioned holonomics at the beginning of this. I don't want to impose, I did just monologue there a bit, but a holonomic view of the brain. And there's a handful of academics.
And tell us exactly what that means. What does a holonomic view of the brain mean?
Right. Thank you. So in the 70s and 80s, Carl Pribram and David Bohm, each were working independently, also out of UC Berkeley and Stanford, respectively, on a holographic view of consciousness. So this is where the Churchlands came in like a decade later and said, no, none of this holographic spiritual mystical nonsense. It's an idea they adopted and borrowed and applied with no legitimate academic validation underneath it. But they put forward the term of holonomics to look at holographic phenomenon, right? And so holographic or holography concerns when anytime the part is contained in the whole and is at least divisible to a fractal logic. Fractal logics have mathematical correspondences that are all established. You can look up mainstream mathematical academic work into fractal mathematics and theory. So that part's not contentious. It's so what if the brain isn't a computational parallel processor? What if it's a fractal holonomic neurophenomenology we don't yet understand? So
this is a whole change of metaphor, essentially, is what you're talking about.
That's what we're leading with, and
we're still kind of working at the level of metaphor. It's the question I have is this a more advanced and likely more accurate metaphor that will ultimately bump up against its own constraints?
Let's ask that question and let's explore it, because we do need to at least set forward some framework before we go in. I mean, at some point, you can lean into me only so much before it's invasive, whether it's with electrodes that they're currently designing at Neuralink, or depth psychology, or powerful Zen coaching. I mean, there are boundaries that are ontologically there. There's self-other that's clear and given. There's 3D, boundaries that are body-mind oriented. But where do we draw the line? Because this is the concern about runaway scientism and runaway linear thinking, Fred, is that as they start to get a toehold, and again, quoting Tristan, the commodification of the last domain on Earth, which is inside the human being, right? This is what social media has really blown open, and the recognition that there are multi-billion-dollar marketplaces to develop pertaining to that. And as new technological pivots are made, let's say it's Elon Musk or someone else breaks through, maybe a startup that has a insight that sort of branches off the current web world into, okay, now there's user-friendly, consumer-safe little plugins that you go see your doctor, and it takes an hour and it costs you $1,000, and it'll have a Bluetooth correspondence to your smart device, and allegedly you'll be uploading or downloading information, and you will perhaps have opened up in their vision your mind, yourself, to that same runaway capitalist marketplace that we see with regard to the internet today. So I feel we are in the last 5 to 10 years of window time. Others say it's like 2 to 3 years before that starts taking off and may be as unstoppable as social media was like around 2008, 9, and 10.
So what's going to be the disruptor of this? And is there a disruptor of this? How are we planning for this?
I, for now, can only speak to the work that I've been doing, and at least I can say on the horizon there are some glimmering lights of hope. Specific researchers, specific projects that do not commit either one of the two big reductionist fallacies. So really there is a sort of schema we're working with of gross reductionism, which is mostly what we've been talking about. But there's also the problem of subtle reductionism. And I personally, in some of the work I do, actually had to deal with a fair amount of that this past week. I was working with a neurofeedback company, and I actually had to tell one of the practitioners, you're not listening, you're imposing the neurofeedback dogma on this subject. And my feeling right now is that you're caught up in a cult of neurofeedback. I literally said that to this individual. And the response wasn't so positive because I kind of burst their bubble a bit for at least a moment. And stopping this immediately, and you've heard me say this before, Sam, invokes in me the Bucky Fuller quote about not competing against existing paradigms, but instead working to render them obsolete by outcreating them. So I, for the last several years, have been in a let's see how we can outcreate them mode, but we're paying attention to the paradigm. I keep a very close eye on technological emergence, and it helps guide, what I'm doing in incubator work, research and development, advanced networking, and also a couple of what have felt to me like very lucky strokes, specifically with a professor of cardiology at Harvard who has just started to come out of stealth mode with a super toroidal imaging technology that may render a lot of what we're seeing at Neuralink and elsewhere obsolete by showing them a much better way to do what they're doing. And here's the fun part. It's non-invasive. They don't have to break any tissue. They can work with headbands, light stuff, even handheld devices, and pick up the electromagnetic field necessary to know what's going on. So the answer to your question, Sam, I feel like is moving into what the last 4 decades of philosophy tried to put the final nail in the coffin of, which was philosophical and medical vitalism, that we are alive and living, that there may be a metabiology that has not been explored. And maybe that metabiology, I contend, concerns biomagnetic fields and hydrophysiology that actually has profound impacts or significance in the world of physics. And this is where you start to sound like a New Age loon if you start talking about how water physics is an amazing area of research and study, right? Like that's laughable to most people.
We've got 4 more minutes here to take it, what you just shared and put it in as neat an envelope as we possibly can as we begin to land this plane. Sure. Fred, do you have any thoughts that you want to share before Farsam tries to land this plane?
Well, he's forced to use reductionism right here, and that's not going to be entirely simple to take everything you have and to dwindle it down to some snippet thumbnails that have the general public have a clue of what we've been talking about in such a way that leave us interested in the next episode.
Well, yeah, because we're going to have to go at least 4 or 5 more episodes with Farsam here. So.
For sure.
Oh, come on, guys. But I do demand the Lex Friedman treatment where occasionally he goes 5 or 6 hours with a single podcast. So
that would be amazing. I'd love that.
Yep.
I'm down.
The thought that I just wanted to end that point on briefly, guys, I'm sensitive to your time here. There was a Caltech water physics conference in 2013. And I'm going to name drop Gerald Pollack, somebody that everybody interested in this should start looking up. He wrote the book, The Fourth Phase of Water, and also another one called Cells, Gels, and I think Miasms. But there's a whole world that's been deeply neglected in biology. Metabiology is sitting here within all of us and around all of us, and it's why you can put your bare feet in the grass and ground to the Earth's magnetic field, and that Earth's magnetic field was already declared via Schumann resonance as a established area of science 4 or 5 decades ago. Victor Schauberger's work in water physics applies to a lot of what goes on inside us. And so it's kind of like this medical scientific orientation for the last 100 years decided to just put on these blinders and not pay any attention to the fact that there's all this phenomenology that's doesn't take a PhD even to really understand or identify or clinically engage, right? Like high school kids can build devices that can detect magnetic fields in your body, but there's no doctor in this country that's going to check your biofield and take it seriously. So
I was going to do that for the last 10 minutes of this conversation when I did my exam with you, but now we only have 2 minutes left, so you're going to have to wait till the next episode for this exam. But that's exactly what I was headed for. So interesting enough.
I uploaded my data to the Akashic Records, Fred, so you can take a look later.
Yeah, we'll do that. No problem.
And I'm sorry to be long-winded, guys. Ask me anything you want. I just wanted to leave it on that positive horizon of
so future. Is the future hopeful or is it doomsday? Where the hell are we? What's going on? What do you got to say if you had to pick? Like, how are we doing here? Is it going? Are we on an upscale? Is it buy or sell? Is it bull or bear? What the hell's going on with our future?
Right here's the challenge. Here's the paradox, guys. If we don't do it, it's a nightmare. If we, the collective we that we like to think of as our extended circles and community. There's a potential, like, really bad, I'm not even going to use curse language right now, scenario. Okay. And there's no part of me that even thinks that we can sit back and hope that someone else somewhere else, someone figures something out and it saves the day at the last minute. It really is going to take this ongoing kind of sense-making analysis, landscape view of what's happening, and this work to find one another in a way. And I think your podcast is going to be huge for that, so that we can break through the technologies, the platforms necessary to sort of outcreate what's already on a runaway train trajectory.
Sam's got to go, and I do too as well. And I just want to know, I want our listeners to realize that, Sam had made me privy of this new internet that you're on the front end of, this centralized, so I guess it'll be called something different than internet. We didn't really get a chance to discuss it, but I just have this idea that it's a function of your commitment to moving this conversation forward and, not counting on anybody else to save the day. In fact, like looking and searching and being that which is going to bring a world that actually works for all of us. So thank you for being that guy.
Thank you. I'd love to explore that with you guys in future conversations and chapters. We're getting to the point now where we can name and articulate platforms and approaches, but yes, using both holochain and some other decentralized approaches. We're confident that the scaling necessary, right? These are like scaling function, like restrictions, and there's rules and laws. Like we can. The only way we're going to out big data is to give millions and then billions of people around the world access to free tools where they do it themselves.
Interesting. Love it.
All right. Well, that's something to dive into next time, which I hope comes soon.
Me too. Thank you, Farsam. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for, sharing yourself, sharing what we're up to, what you're up to, and really for being the man you are. Like in the end, who you are is just one of us, a human who's out here trying to make a difference. And I just have it that you're on the front edge and taking responsibility for a whole lot of thousands or even millions behind you to make sure that this world turns out in a way that's not that nightmare you just referenced. Clear, cancel clear.
Cancel clear. I use that phrase all the time. Is that a reference to Robert Tennyson Stevens' work?
A little bit. Yep.
Conscious language. Yeah, Nice, man. Oh, we're going to talk about that.
And
thank whoever is below the desk there. She did great work today. I really, if she's got a GoFundMe, let me know.
You right now. Yeah. Anyways, thank you. All right, Sam, be good. Farsam, great to meet you. We'll catch you on the backside.
You guys, thank you both.
Thanks again, Insanity listeners. You guys are awesome. Thanks for hanging on, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Beautiful, Farsam. Have a great one, Sam. We'll talk to you next time. Dr. Fred, signing off. Sam, peace, bro.